welcome to another episode of Hot Topics. It is really exciting to have you joining us, and we've got really exciting content for you as part of our new series. In this series, we are going to be looking at the statement, how far is too far, with various different topics and conversations. And so we're going to be letting you know a little bit about what we're going to be looking at in this episode and throughout the series. And then we've also got some exciting new features that will be added to Hot Topics, such as street interviews, different opinions, research, and social media snippets. And so I'd like to introduce to you our co-host for tonight, and also for the episode as we host together, it's Chloe.
Absolutely. Thanks for that introduction here, Elsa. I completely agree with you, And the amazing thing is that some of these topics for you guys sitting at home, we're going to be speaking about party culture, we're going to be speaking about cohabitation, we're going to be speaking about how far is too far in terms of bases, and we're going to be speaking about weed. And when you hear this in Christian circles, the first thing that you think of is, well, these are no-brainers, we all know. We all know that Christians shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. But what we've discovered while researching these topics is that it is not a simple yes or no, but that these are much more nuanced than we thought.
Absolutely. I think a lot of these conversations, it's something that you've grown up either hearing or even adopting a stance that you've heard over the years. And we'd love to, especially in this series, target and these stereotypes that we've grown up believing, or these ideas, and never really unpack to where we got them from. We believe that this series will really have a lot for our young people as well to unpack and start to discover their own meanings and opinions about certain of the topics. And so we'd like to invite you on this journey as well.
And so the first set of videos we're going to be checking out are videos on party culture. So how we did this one is we, instead of going outside to hear what people had to say, we started here with Grace Point's staff team. And what really stood out for me, as you will see with some of the interviews, is in as much as we are the same team, but like normal people, there are issues where we do not have the same opinion. And what also stood out to me just interviewing our staff team is that we are people, we're on a journey. There's things that we're not sure about, but there's also things where we're like, unfortunately my views on X, Y, and Z are not necessarily the popular view in Christian circles. And the first one that we started off was party culture. Now, how were those interviews for you?
I think what was so interesting is it's something that is so common to our society. Parties and celebration, it's everywhere. Now, I think if we look at partying, we don't necessarily mean just going to a club and all that associated behavior. We literally mean the space of celebration in various different forms. And I think what was so interesting is even though we use the word parties, there's a different interpretation by each person of what that means. And so it is a difficult space because it's something that is so prevalent, and for some people it's something they've grown up believing parties is just something you don't do. Whereas other people believe it's okay as a Christian. There was a huge diversity of views.
And I think even it's one of those, even though we all might in principle accept that a space of celebration is a necessary space for humans because we are meant to be happy, we are meant to celebrate milestones, we are meant to celebrate the things that we achieve. But what we also learn when we look at the topic is that it also has to do with what we do in that particular space. It also has to do with why we're in that particular space. Because the last thing we want is to just take a blanket approach to partying and say, hey, look, since partying in principle is okay, it's okay now for you to go numb away the pain of some of the things that you're faced with in life through partying, through excessive partying and binge drinking. And so there's all of these nuances that we just unpack and we see even as we explore the interviews.
And definitely, and the tricky thing about the party space is there's not just one model for it. Every party is different. Every group of people is different. And so every person as an individual is different. So where there's a group of people, you're going to have different experiences. There's some parties that you will go to where it is completely calm and chilled. And then you have those other parties like you're alluding to where you literally have binge drinking and people getting sick and really it being a very, very toxic space. And so it's about how we engage those spaces. There's also a lot of associated behavior that happens at parties, and often we can have those spaces without certain of those behaviors. You know, there's a lot of toxic substances that can be found in certain instances. There's a lot of different cultures. We've got things like rape culture that can come into stuff like this, and we've got a lot of different experiences of parties as well. And I do believe that informs of how we start to think about our ethics in certain spaces.
Absolutely, but we're going to spare you all this information, and I just want you guys to check out the videos that will follow, where we interviewed a couple of our staff members, just hear what their opinions were. We hear from people such as Gary Rivers, Greg, we hear from other team members, but just check this out.
Okay, so listen, I don't think that having a good time is a bad thing. I just think like the way we have a good time, we just need to really think about the decisions that we make. I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone, I'm not trying to be like the moral police here, but at the end of the day, there are real dangers to certain addictive substances, to things that can happen when you're under the influence of those substances that can have a real ripple effect for a long time after the incident. But I think like getting together with people that you love and having a lot of fun and dancing and just enjoying the moment is great.
So party culture, I think, I mean, it's a great thing. You know, I think going to parties, I think dancing, you know, just vibing with people, socializing with people, I think is a good thing. Along with any partying comes responsibilities around alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and all the rest of it. If you're going to a party and the only way you can enjoy a party is if you had to get drunk or get high, then there's a problem somewhere, you know. But if you're going genuinely because you like dancing or you like being with people or you like socializing or you like partying, then that's great. If that stuff leads to other stuff that you're going to regret, like drinking and driving or fall down drunk and all the rest of it, then it's a problem. But I think, and I want to specifically speak to those who are Christ followers, you know. Being a Christ follower doesn't mean that and this is no offense to anyone who stays at home and knits, but you know, it doesn't mean that you have to stay at home all day reading Martin Luther, you know. I think part of our faith in that is that we need to go outside and witness, and what a great witness we can be at parties, saying that I can have one beer or no beers or whatever the case may be and still enjoy myself without having to get fall down drunk or hooked on some weed or whatever the case may be.
You know, my view is I'm one for, you know, you must live a stage of life to the fullest, because then you know, don't look forward to that, you know, afterwards. So you know, you get to a certain age, you know, there's an age when young people start partying and all of those things. You know, I've got kids that, you know, are in a partying stage of their lives. All that I try and encourage is that they do that in a safe, you know, in a responsible way, you know, but that they go there and become themselves, because it's in situations like these, you know, that you become, you know, you start getting to know yourself better and to sort of appreciate how you behave, you know, in the presence of other people. So I would encourage young people to go out and enjoy themselves, but I mean, do it in a responsible way. Because if we stop that or make it difficult for young people to do that, you know, when they've moved on in life, maybe they become, you know, they start families and have children, you know, there will still be that yearning of being out and about and partying, but then it starts complicating life, because then, you know, the children, families, and people are supposed to do things in a rather different way, if you know what I'm saying. So partying, you know, is something that I'd really encourage young people to do.
Party culture, always have a friend that you can rely on to actually be with you when you are doing these things. I think be safe more than anything at all times. So if you're just gonna go out and you're on your own, you have no protection, I mean, the country is not that safe. People's drinks get spiked. People, you know, there's a lot that happens. People get abducted. So you always, if you're going to go out, always make sure that you have a support system or people around you that are going to make sure that you are safe. And I think that's, so how far is too far? How far is too far is you doing it on your own without any support. You just have people around you to do it with.
I think children can go to the party because, but there will be a limit as a parent.
Partying is good for refreshing your mind, and then taking too much of a burden and then but it must be restricted, not abusing alcohol and other things. You can party using oros or anything and then still scream and do whatever, but you don't have to abuse other substances and say it's party. And it's good to be with people, and then it takes away all the stress that we have for the week and whatever, for the month or for the year. So at some stage, one must party.
Was that not amazing? I'm going to be honest. I'm starting to think that some of our staff members actually party more than I do, even though I'm one of the youngest staff members, probably.
You're definitely not one of the youngest. I am the youngest.
You the
staff
youngest,
member.
but I'm probably in that group, of that age category just before Elsa.
So another topic that we're looking at in the series is cohabitation. Now, cohabitation, the way we're looking at it is, what does it mean when two people that are not married in a relationship live together? Is it actually okay? What does our church think about it? What are some of the different opinions about it? And honestly, doing a little bit of research and prep, it's been so interesting of people's different opinions about it. And that'll be reflected in the interviews, as you'll see. We've got lots of different thoughts about it. There's a lot of thoughts that have been raised around concerns of marital behavior. We've got other things about habits changing when you live together before, and we've got lots of other things.
And I think it's such a difficult topic to really give a simple answer to, because you've got couples who tell you that, look, we lived together before we got married, and we eventually got married, and look at us today. But at the back of your head, you're thinking to yourself, I know that it's not wise for us to do that because of some of the things that we get tempted to do when we live together. But at the very same time, you've got people that will tell you that just because we live together does not mean that we're having sex together, And I think that's where we sometimes struggle, man, because we associate cohabitation with sleeping together. But at the very same time, there are people who would tell you that with or without the sleeping together happening, it's just not wise, because then you will get tempted to sleep together and whatever else that may come with marriage that you're not yet ready for.
I've also heard a lot of people say around the issue of cohabitation that they actually advocate for it because they believe that marriage has a likely or a higher chance of success because you get to know each other's habits. I've heard a lot of people that will get divorced over silly little things that are in that marriage obviously very significant. And so they say that to avoid getting married and then finding out about those things later, you live together beforehand. But I think even with different opinions, there is not just one simple answer, as you've highlighted. There are a lot of things like the aspect of sleeping together, the habits bit of it. Finances are even a big issue, and that's why some people might advocate for it. And so we have really started to realize, and we are looking forward to having different thoughts about this in the upcoming episodes. And so we'd like to invite you to join us as we now look at some of the footage that we collected from our staff members on what their heart really is about cohabitation and people living together in a relationship when they're not married.
At the end of the day, my belief is that each one of us have access to God and the Holy Spirit. And I think that each one of us needs to pay more attention to what God is saying to us than what God is saying to us about other people.
Living together, in principle, I don't think is a bad thing at all. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I think today, economically, and you might say, well, I'm just bending towards societal norms, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I have no problem with that issue. Does the living together include sleeping together? Then it's another issue, obviously, which deals with the whole premarital sex issue. But living together, again, if there's boundaries and you're clear on boundaries, I have an issue in that way. And normally when you make a decision about living together, so are you living together to get married, or are you living together to save money, or are you living together just around economics, or are you living together because you're friends, are you living together because you're in a committed relationship? I think all of those things are really important, but I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. And I'd say living together in principle, I have no problem with it. The stuff that you unpack goes around issues around sexuality, around physical boundaries, etc. But in principle, I think it's not a bad thing at all.
Actually, that's an interesting one because, I've got examples of friends, that have kind of lived together in the past, and then, they get married and then things get really very tricky. My advice is that if you are not married, don't live together. I know it's an in thing, people living together even before they get married. Because what I've noticed is that because once people get married, the rules change. So if you are cohabiting and, so if I decide to go and spend time with my friends and not come back, I won't come back and be taken to task, for not coming back. But then when I'm married, things are different. So now if I've been living together with this person for such a long time, and then we end up getting married, the temptation is to carry on doing things as I've been doing before I was married. And then once I start getting confronted on that kind of conduct and behavior, it starts creating a problem in a relationship. So my advice to you, stay apart and only stay together when there's a ring in a finger.
Yeah, look, it's not ideal. I think just because I know the Bible says that the heart is wicked above all things. So, we may trust ourselves to a degree, but I think sometimes temptation is just too great for the human heart to bear. And I would just caution people against that. It's not about right or wrong, it's about what you can bear and your relationship and your commitment to God and to the person, so it's definitely also a difficult one, but I think it does open the door to more of a struggle for both individuals.
Well, I stand by the law that once you spend more than 2 years, just consider yourself as an item. Whatever happens, then we are contracted to all the agreement that is done between the two people in terms of staying together.
So as you can see, we definitely had a lot of different opinions about this, but we really enjoyed hearing from people. And we'd even love to hear from you if you want to leave us a comment about how you feel about some of these topics.
Absolutely. It is just so exciting. But then, after cohabitation, then one of the topics we're going to be speaking about is how far is too far. I'm laughing because I could imagine if you're sitting with your son or daughter at home, this is like that awkward moment when you've got a sex scene on the TV coming on and you do not know whether you should walk out of the room or you should change the channel. It's as awkward a topic as that. And so we're also going to be looking as part of this series, the whole conversation around how far is too far. When it comes to an unmarried couple, where does it end? Does it end at holding hands, or does it end when you kiss, or does it end when you have almost had sex? Where do we draw the line? And I think it is so important. This is such an important conversation because so many young adults, so many teenagers, so many unmarried couples live in condemnation because of the struggle around these kind of topics. And at the same time, some of them live with so many questions, And so I just think it's such an important conversation to uncover. How far is too far? At what point do we say, that's it, I stop here, I cannot explore any further than that?
Absolutely. I think, as we'll see in one of the interviews, what someone mentioned was the fact that there was these silent years where older generations of parents in the past were so afraid to speak about issues like this that you had young people going out, doing things, not being advised, and not really understanding what really goes on. And that's where you had a lot of things like teenage pregnancy and rape and things like that. And I do believe it's a really important conversation, as uncomfortable as it may be, for families to have, to actually say how far is too far, and even couples, young couples, to have a conversation to say, where do we agree? How far is too far for us? And I do believe that it comes to a point where it is a personal decision that has to be taken.
I so agree with you, Ilse, and I think it has to be something that couples do speak about, to say, where do we agree on stopping, and what's our ethic, what are our values, and I think which brings in other topics, that are so important that we've always preached within the Christian community. But for me, it also becomes so important on a personal level because it creates clarity, and with clarity, we then begin to feel we begin to enjoy true freedom, We are now free. We know that there's clarity around us. And we also don't want to live and raise up a generation of young people that condemn their feelings and some of their biological changes. We need that clarity in order for people to enjoy life for what it truly is. But You and I aren't doing the talking today. It's all about the street interviews. If you could just take a second once again to hear what some of our team members had to say about this particular topic. And I hope that this will also be an opportunity for you to really begin the conversation, even though we're going to have an expert helping us unpack it at a later stage. But start the conversation in your own life, in your own household. This might be the right time. And I just pray that this will be an opportunity for you to start doing this. Check out the street interviews.
Yeah, so I think one day there's a big possibility that a lot of you are going to get married. A lot of people get married, and you have to decide, like, what are you going to be okay with having experienced before that with other people, and you have to think about what images you're okay with in your mind and in your psyche when you are with your partner for life.
Again, I think it boils down to your conviction, your character, and self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. So I think purity is possible. The Word of God says it's possible, but I know it's not always attainable for some of us. But I think it's a difficult one. Again, for some people, a kiss is too far, and for others, more than a kiss is too far. It depends. And for others, too far is maybe not far enough. So, it's a difficult one. I think it all boils down to your relationship with God and your character and how you want to go forward from there,
Ooh, this one is a tough one, hey? Sure. From a Christian perspective, again, there's the whole sex before marriage thing. When you're in a relationship, I think it's best to always communicate what each person wants out of the relationship, what they're comfortable with. We prefer an equally yoked couple as Christians, where the values are the same. So you both believe that you shouldn't have sex before marriage. That would be perfect, or that would be the perfect balance. But should you be in a relationship with someone who actually doesn't believe the same thing, then you two have to find that balance of where it is that you limit. So say as a girl, for instance, you're feeling like there's too much pressure. Say your partner wants to have sex, but you don't want, and there's too much pressure. Then you both have to either through counseling or any other form find a balance or a middle ground where you're both comfortable enough to say, okay, this feels okay for me and I don't feel like I am violating my values.
I think I will speak on my own children, because as my husband and I, we were learning from the same high school, same class. So then when we were in grade 10, we started dating, and then to finish school, we finished, but not as the good results we were expecting, because we were spending much time, instead of studying, then we were chatting. So I think it's not okay, because you are just holding two stones. This is hot and this is cold, and then which one do you hold into? So I think you just have just to not go beyond what you are required to do. But it's nice to chat and
And was that not hectic? I can imagine if you're sitting at home with your parents right now, that was probably a cringe fest, And for parents, you might have been thinking to yourself, oh my boy, it seems like this is the time now. We need to go have that conversation. Well, happy awkward hour. But it's much needed and it is necessary. And so we're now going to be looking at the last topic, which is...
So our last topic for this series that we're going to be looking at over a series of weeks is going to be on weed, marijuana, Mary Jane, lots of different names that we have about it. I think the beauty of this one is that often we don't even know if we're all speaking the same language, because there are so many different names for this. And so what we'll be looking at over this episode is the nuances of this topic. it's something that cannot just be answered with a blanket answer. Is it right? Is it wrong? There's also the legalization of it, the medical benefits that some people believe there are, and there's also the positive and negative sociological, psychological, and physiological effects of marijuana.
As a 90s kid, when we speak of weed, the first thing that comes into mind is a song by Afro Man. Some of you guys might remember it. I would have done my bid, but then I got high. And as he sings the song, he mentions all of the things that he would have done, but then he got high. And then he goes on to sing, ah, la, la, and then he sings all of this. But the association is that weed stopped him from doing something important that was meant to do, stuff like paying his child support. And that's some of the things we're going to look at as we explore this topic as to what are some of the side effects of weed and what is its impact what the impact on society is. One can imagine if, in as much as this might not be the case, but if Afro Man says, I would have paid my child's support, but then I got high, what are the ripple effects of that, and how does weed affect broader society, but at the very same time, how then would it be something good?
Yeah, absolutely. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen how a lot of the stance of people has changed from it being formally described as a gateway drug to it being almost a more liberal stance. And yet we still have some people that are firm advocates that it should not have been legalized. And so we're going to really open up that conversation. Once again, it might be a great opportunity for you as a family to speak about this and see what you believe your stance on it should be for your family. And even as a young person, maybe this is an opportunity for you really just to open up your mind and explore and think about it from a different perspective that you may never, ever have thought about.
Oh, man, I really want to encourage families to check out this episode, to watch it with us. I think it is so important. It is a family conversation, primarily because there are genetic stuff that would affect how one family responds to weed and how their body responds to weed and other stuff like that. So I think it is such an important conversation for the family space, but let me spare you all of that.
Awesome. So we've got these interviews that we have done, and we are really looking forward to you listening to them and really having to see what different opinions we find in this. We've got lots of different views, from the most conservative to the most liberal about it. And so please enjoy the interviews that we've got lined up for you.
So I think that I don't have a problem with it in a sense that, until I understand that alcohol, and I know that's a cop-out, until I understand that alcohol, pain medication, cigarettes and all the rest of it. So for some reason that weed has got this, and I know some people say it's mind-altering, whatever the case may be, but I think like with a lot of stuff, and don't judge me on this, is that if you're taking stuff with a good balance and I think it's okay. And I think that we are extremely judgmental when it comes to weed, but we don't do the same around alcohol. Just as an example.
Weed, it seems to grow wild. I don't know enough about it, but I do know people that have been badly affected by it, so I would be against it just because their lives have been turned upside down and been destroyed, and one thing's led to another. So that's just my experience.
Weed is, an interesting one. I tried it once. You know what, I actually don't have much of an opinion with it. I think as long as it doesn't affect the next person. I know it's a natural herb, and most people use it recreationally. How far is too far when it comes to weed? As if it gets to a point whereby you can't do life without it, then that's a bit too far.
It is a drug, for starters, in my view, so it's unsafe. Actually, smoking anything for that matter, not just weed, drugs, even cigarettes, they're not good for your health. So if young people cannot avoid those, by all means.
I think if it is people they are taking it legally, it's okay. And then, but the more you still utilizing it, That's why people get addicted to it. But as long people use it for medicinal purposes as well, and you know too much of a thing is dangerous, and then people get addicted, and they must follow all the prescript of using it. You eat, you smoke it, and then you don't just use it as your food. And that's when you get the side effect of using it, of taking it.
Now, that was also interesting just to hear how people's views have really changed around weed. One would imagine, had we taken those, had we had those street interviews many years back, it would have probably been a very clear yes or no, with the yes being in the minority. You know.
And I think given our South African circumstances around this issue, our thoughts have really changed, and the process of thought from a lot of people has changed about this over the years.
Absolutely. So that's our 4 topics for this particular series. And what we're also going to be doing, which is always an exciting feature of Hot Topics, is bringing in experts into the studio. Some of the guys we're going to have and women we're going to have in this particular series is people like Professor Milan Nel, who actually is one of the leading scholars, global scholars, around issues related to youth and youth ministry. Very exciting to sit at his feet. We want to join you for that one. It will be beneficial for all people. And we also have one of our local pastors that's going to be joining us, and that is the children's pastor from Bryanston Methodist, Lisa, and she'll be joining us for some of the communications. We also have a whole lot of youth pastors coming in for this one. I feel like it's a youth ministry invasion, but when we say youth ministry, usually what we always think is, okay, this is for youth, but no, ministry to youth is a global responsibility. So it's going to be equipping for parents, it's going to be equipping for people that still struggle with some of these issues, because weed is not only a youth-related issue.
And I think it's really a family series. So by family, I don't mean just like the family living in your house, but it is a community conversation where we want to encourage you with friends, with family, with loved ones, and maybe even the person on the street to have the conversation around some of these issues and really just open up your thinking and thoughts around some different perspectives about these issues. And so we are really looking forward to having you join us for the series.
And please do join us. Remember, we also have our Tuesday night chats. And perhaps what you could consider doing for this particular week is, if anything is triggered by some of the topics we've already spoken about, this is a great opportunity for you to bring in some questions that we might not necessarily answer on Tuesday, but we've got good time in between the different topics to ask other experts and some of our ministers around these topics. Because the whole point is not for us to tell you what's right and what's wrong, but it's for us to begin a journey together as a community into figuring out some of life's most complicated questions. And so that's it for tonight. I am so excited. Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. We might have some awkward moments, but just come along the journey with us. So we will see you next week for our next episode of the series, How Far is Too Far when it comes to party culture. It's really going to be an exciting episode, so please do join us next week.